2 elected Democrats were gunned down in what now appears to be a politically motivated attack. The alleged shooter apparently had a list of dozens of names of other Democratic officials, over 70. You would think a story like this would stop us all in our tracks. But in a week like this, I honestly don't know if anything can sort of sober us up or make us go, wait a minute, we've got to change something here. But there's a familiarity to this, at least of what we've known about the suspect. It has the hallmarks of something we've seen before, the Tree of Life synagogue shooting, the Country Music Festival massacre in Las Vegas in particular, both very heinous acts committed by older men, middle-aged men, radicalized, apparently online. We don't quite know that about the Vegas guy. We do know that on the Tree of Life guy. And it's hard to imagine that this won't be the case with this Minnesota assassin. With what's happening online, right? And look, I know there is this sense of, these guys are crazy people. Rhetoric's just rhetoric, but we know crazy people get triggered by rhetoric. And here's the uncomfortable pattern. The politically motivated violence in this country has been more often coming from the right than the left. Now, the right bullying ecosystem will respond and attack me, for instance, by saying this, by trying to equate violence from protests with the same violence from these radicalized assassins. But the two are not the same, right? One is collective outrage that can sometimes spiral into chaos because bad actors infiltrate. The other is premeditated political murder. 10x, than anything you can equate with what happened, whether you want to equate during the George Floyd protests or what we've seen with these other protests. And the distinction matters a lot. So look, and let me accept the premise of the right wing for a minute. In fact, let's say you are on the right, you believe the left is a more violent political movement than you are. Then it should be all the more reason to condemn this action in Minnesota with even more vigor and more outrage. Because if you believe this is not becoming of the right wing, this is not becoming of the conservative movement, in some ways there should be more outrage from the right about this and not a whole bunch of whataboutism. Because one of the things that drives me batshit crazy when it comes to our political debate is the number of people that justify their bad actions by pointing to the other side. Nobody seems to want to live by the adage of 2 wrongs don't make a right. And look, it's pretty clear Donald Trump is not interested in lowering the temperature. Let me quote you what he said on Sunday when asked about the situation in Minnesota. The president said, well, that's a terrible thing. And then he was referring to Tim Walz. I think he's a terrible governor. I think he's a grossly incompetent person. But I may call him. I may call other people too. Question was about whether he was going to call the governor of Minnesota. Think about it. Just let me read this statement again. This is, again, in the last 48 hours, Tim Walz finds out 2 people he worked quite closely with were gunned down by an assassin. A bunch of friends. He's probably on this target list as well. We don't know that for sure. Tina Smith, the U.S. senator, said she's on the list. But a slew of Democrats are on the list. Pretty much every elected official in Minnesota is scared essless. Okay? And Donald Trump says the following: I think he's a terrible governor. I think he's a grossly incompetent person, but I may call him. I may call other people too. In the pre-Trump era, a moment like this might prompt an American president to give a unifying speech, maybe even a primetime speech. We got to turn the temperature down. But the president isn't going to do that. It's not this president, because confrontation is his comfort zone. Reflection is not in his rhetorical playbook, and he won't accept the premise that he has contributed to this atmosphere that we're all living in. Okay? I could argue and make a strong case that he is the instigator here. But I'm going to accept the premise that there are more than one instigators. But here's the thing. He chose to be president of the United States of all Americans. And I know he only wants to govern for his base. But this is a moment where if he doesn't do it, we're on the precipice. And we all are feeling this way. One spark feels like it's going to set us off into some explosive, horrendous moment. None of this is playing well for him politically. In fact, you actually saw that on display at his military-themed birthday parade this weekend. Weather was grim, crowd was thin, and the mood was flat. Meanwhile, the No Kings protests drew thousands from coast to coast. A lot of those protests were also in the rain, and yet they showed up for those. Might be the clearest signal yet where the political energy in this country is heading. And that's the thing. The irony here is that if Donald Trump would accept the tiniest bit of the premise that he is participating and contributing to this current unstable political environment, he could buy himself some political lifelines here a little bit. It would turn the temperature down and would give him an opportunity to try to actually heal politically. But he's going to go down this road, and this isn't going to live well. Look, I lived through this cycle myself. In 2018, I had to wake up to the news of a man who mailed pipe bombs to CNN, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and others. Turned out he had my face on his van, literally, with a group of 4 other reporters that were considered the, quote, enemy of the people, a phrase that, of course, he got and was inspired by Donald Trump. That phrase all came from him, and all of this man's rhetoric came from him. I'm not saying Donald Trump ordered this crazy man to attack members of the press, Democratic office holders, but he is creating an environment and is inspiring weak-minded individuals who are a bit broken, who take his words literally and seriously, and in some cases to act upon them. And not once has this man has ever acknowledged the role he's done in there. And, I have to be honest, I still, to this day, was not comforted when I got visited by the FBI to inform me, hey, by the way, this guy targeted you. This is what's happening to all these elected officials in Minnesota. They're getting a visit from the FBI to let them know he's on their list. You know what all that does is too? It's like, oh, gee, thanks. Now what am I supposed to do? Well, we just want to let you know. And what it is, it's the FBI doing a little CYA. But look, he has created an environment of violence, right? He pardoned the January 6th rioters, right? If he thought political violence was wrong, he never pardons those folks. But he sent a clear message. Political violence is tolerable if the target is your enemy. That's the message he sent with that pardoning, with those pardons. And, you live in a world where you reap what you sow. And what's not fair is that state representative. She didn't do this. She didn't create these conditions. This crazy man was whipped up, and he's responding to a whipped up political environment. And it's a whipped up political environment led by one man. Now, here's the thing. He can tone it down. He has the ability to do this if he wants to be president of a country that doesn't hate each other and isn't on the brink of some sort of hot war. But he is creating a terrible situation. And this is, it's morally wrong, and it's how republics fall. And here's another thing. Considering that the president was a target himself of an assassination attempt and a second assassin that seemed to be stalking him, that he could be speaking to this issue with credibility, with a different kind of credibility, unfortunately, as somebody who has felt this moment. And it clearly impacted him for a period of time. So it almost makes it even more head scratching and more frustrating that he doesn't speak to this moment.